The movie The Help is centered around two main characters, Aibileen Clark and Skeeter. Skeeter is a white young woman who's educated and pursued further education and a career. Aibileen is a black nanny in the South who works for these white suburban families, raising their kids and taking care of their homes. Skeeter one day comes back home, finds that her beloved nanny, who was practically like a mother to her, is gone. No one would tell her why, so she investigates more. In this process, she sees that these ladies that practically raise them, these nannies, are treated with disrespect, discrimination, and with hate, because they grow up eventually to be like their mothers instead of by the person that raised them. And I think this whole story is basically nature versus nurture. The people who nurture and take care of you, but it's truly the outside forces that also affect you as well. Nature. And in this process, Skeeter realized the harsh treatment of these nannies and decides to put her writing degree to the test and basically write a book about the help, the nannies, in the 1960s in the South, mostly. The two main volunteers for these stories are Aibileen and Minnie. Minnie is more outspoken than Aibileen, but Aibileen is older and more wiser. Aibileen has worked through many jobs and experienced a lot of stuff. Minnie also has kids, but Aibileen did have kids, but her son was also shot in a drive-by. Within the process of all of this, they want their identities to be secret. For back in the 1960s, being caught talking about other people, especially white women, behind their backs would be considered a death sentence. And would end up them either getting jailed, which would probably be the safest thing for them, or killed and being dragged across streets in the back of a truck. So Skeeter does promise that their confidentiality would be secured. So they volunteer, tell their stories, and one of the most cruelest ladies within this whole entire movie is a woman named Hilly Holbrook. Hilly Holbrook is still a fairly young mother, but is more cynical, I would say. She is friends with Skeeter when they were in high school and in college, but she decided to find a husband, settle down, and have kids, where Skeeter went off and pursued an education and a career. These two represent two different aspects of women in the 60s, the old traditional kind and the new modern woman. However, at the beginning they still remain friends, but she finds out that Hilly also treats these women, these nannies, with disrespect and cruelty and discrimination. So in this process, she distances herself from Hilly, for Hilly wants also for Skeeter to publish in their local column in their town's newspaper the Health Initiative Act for sanitary uses. For Hilly thinks that people of color carry different diseases than they do, and wants to pass this bill on to the governor so he could pass it. And Skeeter just thinks this is truly wrong. So throughout the whole movie, she just barely talks to Hilly and gets involved. Alongside Hilly is another friend of hers who's not very that outspoken, but also a young mother. Her name is Elizabeth. And basically, Hilly is like the head of the community of the white suburban ladies. And everyone just follows her example. Except for Skeeter. Most of these women are married and have kids, where Skeeter doesn't really want to get married, but she does want to date. So everyone gets worried that Skeeter might be gay, and so they set her up with Stuart, who off and on again doesn't show up on their dates. And when he finally does, he shows up drunk and mocks her of her job, her education, and then that she must be like her friends looking for a husband to settle down. And that's what their education's used for, to find husbands in college. And that's it. But Skeeter tells him off and tells him that basically she doesn't care what he thinks. She is using her education wisely, and it's better than what he's doing with his life, which is basically working on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean. Skeeter and Stuart at first clash with each other, but eventually grow on each other and start dating for reals after he apologizes for that terrible date. And then later dumps Skeeter due to the fact that he finds out that she's writing a book about the help. And says that's just too much and is too stressful, so she leaves him and he leaves her. But in another part of the story is Cecilia Foote. Cecilia Foote is from a poor class but marries an upperclassman. But since that upperclassman is Johnny that she has married, that was Hilly's old ex-boyfriend. So Hilly thought she was dumped by Johnny for Cecilia, even though he hasn't met Cecilia up until that point. So Cecilia is hated by Hilly and the rest of the community. So nobody will work for her for help, and no one will communicate with her within a white suburban community. So she's more isolated after getting married. However, after Minnie loses her job for just using the bathroom inside the house, even though she got permission from Hilly's mother, who owns the house, she was fired, and nobody else would hire her because Hilly was spreading rumors and lies about her. So the only place that was hiring at the time was Cecilia Foote's house, and that was on the edge of town. So Minnie headed all the way outside town looking for a job, and Cecilia was happy. No one would talk to her, no one would communicate with her, so she was glad to have the company. But the reason why she was hiring the help was because she wanted to think, or allow Johnny to think, that she could do everything on her own. But in the process, she really wasn't a feminine figure. She didn't know how to cook, clean, or do daily tasks of a woman that was supposed to have, or abilities or skills within the 1960s. However, along with Miss Cecilia's lack in cooking and cleaning and home ec skills, she also is kind of infertile, which in the 1960s was a hush topic. Nobody really talked about it, but it was a serious issue. For women think if they couldn't bear a kid or children, that they were broken, they were useless. There was no point for them to exist because the whole thing of getting married is to have kids. But Minnie helps her through all this tough times and raises her spirits back up. Along with this, Johnny also notices the cooking, the cleaning, the house, and realizes that she must hire someone to help her, and realizes that she's gotten better since she came into the house, which is Minnie. And he appreciates her and allows her to keep her job there working. And then the next scene will probably be when Skeeter has her book published and Hilly reads it and finds out and confronts her. However, There's one story that reassures that Hilly won't start spreading rumors that book is from their town. It's when Minnie came over after she was fired and was angry and brought home a pie to their house, a chocolate pie, in fact. And she only allowed Miss Hilly to eat it. And this pie was actually Minnie's feces, and she watched Hilly eat it. And then when she told her face blew up with anger, and that story kind of ensures that Hilly's not going to be spreading these rumors that the book is from their town. She would try to diverge everybody's attention from it. So once the book is published, Hilly confronts her, or confronts Skeeter at her house. But throughout the whole process, Skeeter's mother really was lacking, both in her life and in the story. But up until this point, she actually defends her, for she realizes that she missed out being a mother. Sure, she gave birth, but the whole thing is that you didn't raise her. And she was upset that Constantine took that kind of away from her, even though she hired Constantine to do that. The whole issue is with the 1960s, these women were hired to raise these women's kids. But in the process, they lose that whole idea of like who raised who. Was it the maid or was it the mother? Who affected who? The kid. And when she finds out that her kid actually loves Constantine a little bit more than she did, she kind of was upset and hesitant to tell her the truth that Constantine, the cause of her disappearance was because she was fired out of anger at a dinner party for a social event because she was kind of older and slower. So Skeeter was upset with her and didn't want to speak to her own mother. However, their relationship is mended after this point where Hilly confronts Skeeter at their house about the book. But even Skeeter tells her that if you talk about it, people are going to find out that person is you. So Hilly gets freaked out and just drives back home. Another important aspect of this book is Yulme Davis. Yulme Davis, after Minnie was fired from the residence, Yulme took over the job that she had at Hilly's. However, Yulme had 2 twin sons but could only afford to send one to college. So she asked if Hilly could lend her a loan and she would pay it off by working for free. However, Hilly was cynical and judgmental and didn't allow it. So one day while cleaning the house, she finds a ring behind the couch and decides to try to pawn it because she never asked for a ring or never heard that it disappeared or anything, so she thought she wouldn't notice. But when she did that, Hilly called the police like it was some kind of trap that she made. And so she calls the police, she gets arrested, and after that sets the big motion of all the caretakers in that town to volunteer their stories for the book, which sets in motion more stories to even get the book published. Because at that time, the book wasn't going to be published if they didn't have enough stories from a variety of nannies that worked in that town. So Yulme Davis set in motion the book, The Help, and made a big difference. And as the concluding scene goes on, Skeeter realizes there's nothing much for her in her town. She made enemies with practically everybody that she used to be friends with, and that she needs to further advance her life with her career. And everyone is very accepting of it. All the people that she gathers stories from and build relationships with. However, the last scene is when Aibileen is working for Elizabeth, and the same thing that happened to Yolme Davis happened to her, where they think silverware is missing from the drawers of the house. And she tells her that the baby must have gotten it, which is pretty common for babies to take stuff. But they still don't believe her and think that she's lying. But she tells her that no matter what, even if you fire me, we all know your secrets. And that was to Hilly and Elizabeth. And so with this, that the women of that town kind of get scared that even though they had all these secret things, these women are watching and listening. They're not quiet. They know everything that goes on in that house. And she tells Elizabeth that you better not hurt this baby and you better show her love for the lack of my absence. Which it was very heartbreaking because that baby loved her so much. And she had to leave that poor baby behind because it was practically like raising a kid. Even though it wasn't, you didn't give birth to it, you raised it. You taught it to walk, stand, eat, drink, laugh, cry, all that. So the whole thing is that it's heartbreaking. These women face each day, they face discrimination, they face heartbreak, and both the women, white suburban women of education and women of color. This movie represents discrimination on multiple levels and is a classic representation of the 1960s struggle within southern states or Jim Crow states.